Story 1. This just happened the other day at the store I dislike more than anything. To understand this story, two things you have to know first. About 6 months ago, I lost my legs from the knees down due to diabetes. Second, I have always carried a firearm for many years. I know many officers because I go to the range, and this is important. I was at Wally World with my son. He went off with a cart to get some things. All of a sudden, this large woman came up to me and very rudely said, "I need your wheelchair." I looked at her and said, "No." She then said, "I need it more than you." I looked at her and said, "Lady, I don't care what you want. I have no legs," and wheeled off. No more than 5 minutes later, she is screaming at me, saying I stole her chair, which makes no sense because on the back of my seat is a painting of my childhood idol, Ace Frehley. I looked at her and said, "Leave me alone. This is not your chair." As I started to wheel off, she actually came up behind me, pushed me off my wheelchair, got into it, and took off. Management came running, and my son came flying through the store. He is very protective of me. Everyone was trying to help me. The cops were called. The officers, we will call Jack and Maria, who I know very well from the range, saw me on the floor and honestly were shocked, seeing me lying there on the floor. I told them everything that happened. When they caught up to the woman, she claimed I stole her wheelchair. As I said earlier, I have always carried a firearm. A friend of mine made me a holster that looks like it carries a cell phone and a small iPad, which is attached to the side of my chair. When she was brought to me, she was screaming at me, saying I should be arrested for stealing her chair. Jack and Maria held back laughter because they knew she was full of it. Maria, who is the sweetest and kindest person, saw the holster, looked at the woman, and Jack knew what was about to happen. Maria said, "Ma'am, what is on the side of the chair?" She told them it was her phone and coupons. Maria said, "Can you show me?" And she refused. Maria said to her, "If this wheelchair belongs to you, then show me the contents." She said, "Fine." When she opened the holster, her eyes got larger beyond belief. Jack looked at her and said, "You are arrested for assault and a felony of stealing a firearm." When she was being put in cuffs, she was kicking and screaming like a 2-year-old. Being in a wheelchair is an adjustment and not an easy one. People look at you, some make comments. It is not easy. Story 2. Short backstory. My mother, who I was very close with, passed away suddenly from COVID 3 days before Christmas last year, 2021. I live on the other side of the country, and my brother lives on the other side of the state from where our mom lived. So we arrived the next day and stayed at her home, our former childhood home, to try and deal with everything surrounding a sudden death, as well as take care of her cats. My father, will call him Spencer, has been estranged since I was about 12 years old, and I have not spoken to him since then. He was not, and is not, a nice person, so I am definitely not missing out on anything. My parents never bothered to divorce. Why? I have no idea. On to the petty revenge. A few days after my mom passed, I woke up around 11 am due to being in a different time zone. My brother is still asleep as he works the night shift. This is relevant, I promise. After my brief morning routine, I noticed a police car in the driveway and headed outside to find out what was going on. The officer asked if I lived there, so I explained the above story to him as to why I was there. At this point, I had started crying, having to go through everything again. The officer then asked if I knew someone named Spencer, which completely floored me. I told him yes, I did. He is my father, who I have not spoken to in over 15 years. The officer then tells me that Spencer called the police saying that someone was trespassing on his property and wanted them out. The someone being my brother and me. Apparently, Spencer came to my mom's house early that morning, and no one answered the door as we were both asleep. He assumed we were ignoring him and called the police. My brother had his number blocked, but he called and left a voicemail saying he would be back with the police to bust the door down, which we heard later that day. Since my parents never divorced and my mom's will was almost 30 years old at this point, that meant that the house was legally his now. After the officer explained to me the situation, I saw Spencer pull into the driveway. The officer tells me that I did not need to interact with him at all and said I could wait inside while he spoke with him. Spencer ended up giving us until the end of the day to leave the premises. So my brother and I, along with a couple of family members that lived nearby, helped us collect some of our childhood possessions and photo albums and left. I flew home the next day. What Spencer arrived to the next day, I know he was there. He texted me asking where my mom kept her cash was a disaster. My mom had two elderly cats that had issues with finding the litter box at times. So there was cat pee and cat poop scattered through the house that we did not bother to clean up. There was decomposing food in the kitchen. A couch was overturned in the living room. We had to flip it to catch one of the cats. The trash had not been taken out. There were dirty dishes in the sink. On top of that, he now had a house with over 30 years of accumulated belongings that he now had to clean and empty by himself. My brother and I had planned on cleaning as well as we could and starting the process of preparing the house to sell. But thanks to Spencer calling the police on us, that was now all his problem. He ended up sending my brother a letter through a family member, complaining about how messy he left the house and how much money he had to spend to empty the property. It is shocking how actions have consequences. Story 3. I have an update post to make soon, but for now, here is one of my past issues with my parents that I talked about during the family intervention not too long ago. Back when I was still a kid, it was very hard for anything to be exclusively mine. And as my brother got older, he craved money for things above all else. He and I both got allowances, equal allowances, so that was sort of fair. I say sort of because he did not have to do chores for it, while I did. But that is in the past now because my brother is now having to do all those chores for nothing. My brother always wanted more money though, whether he spent it or not. He loved having new things, but sometimes he would just save the money instead. Which is odd because you would think him the kind of kid who would splurge his savings on the first thing he wants. My brother and I both got allowances of about $25 a month, and I was pretty thankful for it. I usually saved most of my money though, but my brother always wanted more. One day as a teenager, I came home to find my room had been ransacked, and the only thing gone was my money. I had hidden it to try and keep it from my brother because, well, obvious reasons if you readers know what my brother is like by now. I thought I had hidden it well, but he found it anyway. My mom was home when he did it too, and she acted like she did not even notice. But there is no way she could not have heard him tearing my room up. I called her out on that during the intervention, and she just cried and made excuses about my brother being special until other family members told her to shut up and own up to it. My room was on the first floor right near the living room. My door was completely in view of the couch. And when I pointed this out back then, my mom just made the, "But he is special. He is not like you," excuse for my brother. I said I wanted the money back, and my mom just made more excuses. And my dad did too when he got home later. So yeah, excuses then and now. Back then, I did eventually get that money back because I refused to let it go. I heard my brother screaming as they took the money out of his piggy bank and gave it back to me. And they had the most disappointed looks on their faces, like I had just robbed my brother, even though he had robbed me. But they could not tell me off because I was not in the wrong, and they knew it. I do not imagine many kids getting in the kind of situations where they are more right about something than their parents very often. A few months later, the whole situation repeated. My brother ransacked my room again and stole the money I had hidden again. That time my parents did not want to do anything about it, and basically said that they could not bear to see my brother so disappointed from taking his money. I reminded them that the stolen money was not his money, and it was really unfair that they were just sitting back and letting that happen. My dad yelled at me to go to my room for saying that. So the next day, I rode my bike to my aunt's house and told her everything. She came back home with me and asked my parents if they really let my brother steal from me and did nothing about it. My mom just started whining that my brother has special needs, and she did not want to make him cry again. And my dad backed her up. My aunt just gave them both that narrow-eyed look and reminded them they have two sons, and my feelings mattered too, and what they were doing was very wrong. And it meant that my brother would never respect boundaries and would think he can always get away with stealing when he gets older. My aunt asked me openly how much my brother took. I stated the number, which at the time was everything I had, save for the few bucks in my wallet. My aunt gave my parents an expectant glare. My parents tried making a few more excuses, but my aunt had a counter for each one. Finally, my parents went into my brother's room, and a moment later, my brother was screaming. My parents came back with all of the money my brother took and practically threw it at me for making my brother cry. My aunt then told them off for acting that way when I had done nothing wrong, and they picked up all of the money they had thrown at me and gave a pretty forced apology. My aunt said that she would be severely disappointed in them if they let this situation repeat. And before she left, My aunt offered for me to hide my money at her house in a lockbox she had. I took her up on that and started keeping my savings over there. My brother ended up ransacking my room 2 more times looking for money, but I was keeping every cent I had at my aunt's house. My parents actually asked me where I had hidden it, and I refused to tell. Then I asked why they wanted to know so badly anyway, and my dad instantly got defensive about it. My mom calmed him down, and they did not ask again. Since he could not find my money in my room, my brother figured I must have hidden it somewhere else. So he started tearing the house apart one room after another. And who was made to clean up the mess? Why, yours truly, of course. My parents started to blame me for the whole situation. But when I asked how I was at fault for not letting my brother steal from me, their only counter was that my brother had special needs. I swear, they used that line with me thousands of times. That was something else I heavily berated my parents for in the family intervention. The final straw came when my brother ransacked our parents' bedroom. My parents had a small suitcase safe that they kept some cash in, and my brother locked himself in their room, then took the whole safe and started bashing it around on stuff to try and get it open because he could not find the keys. By the time my parents were able to get the door open by breaking it open, my brother had destroyed the room, and he never got that safe open. He just sat on the floor clutching it and crying about the money inside it. My dad was so angry that he turned red, and they actually started yelling at my brother and grounded him. A very rare sight for me to see back then indeed. Then my parents forced my brother to help clean up the mess. After that, my brother never ransacked mine or my parents' rooms looking for money again. But he would still go rooting around every time he got an idea where my savings might be. So I started acting like I was giving hints by repeatedly going into certain places while he was watching. He ransacked the backyard shed, dug a bunch of holes in the yard and under the back porch, and even ransacked the attic. My parents really hit their breaking point with the attic and grounded my brother again. They never figured out I let him on either. My parents did eventually figure out I was keeping my money at my aunt's house, and they did not argue with my reasoning for doing it. But either my brother overheard, or one of them spilled the beans to him because the next time we visited my aunt, my brother tried to hunt for the money. But my aunt yelled at him to stop, and my brother would just sit on the floor and cry. This happened a few times, and my aunt bluntly stated she would press charges for any damages if my brother ransacked anything, and also kept a digital camera on hand to record anything if need be. My parents heavily scolded my brother to stop looking for my money. It was not his, and he could not have it. Cue more screaming and crying that he wanted it like a 3-year-old, even though he was 7 at the time. Then my brother said he did not want to go to Auntie's house anymore, so my parents visited less. My aunt visited us a lot more than we visited her anyway. I was pretty much able to keep my money away from my brother until after I moved out. He has never managed to steal cash from me again. His classmates at school were another story. He was caught looking through the backpacks of other kids many times, and he was forced to return stolen stuff and then sent home, where he would cry to mom and dad, who then tried to have words with the school, which berated them on letting my brother think what he was doing was okay. They had to teach my brother that it is not okay to go through other people's stuff, and I actually heard him say, "But I wanted what they had," a few times. This excuse got used again when my brother stole an envelope with birthday money from a cousin during their birthday party. He tried to stuff it in his shirt and walk out with it later. But the cousin noticed it was missing, and I suspected my brother right away and pointed everyone to him. He ended up crying and thrashing when my dad found the envelope hidden in his shirt. We left that party early,